like you mentioned, if you're playing blackjack or whatever, you're playing against the house, whereas poker, you're playing against other guys. So there's a lot of strategy involved and almost like a lot of psych out strategy you might use. Is that something that's very important? We talk about the proverbial poker face. You mentioned some guys are a little bit more aggressive in the way they play. So kind of talk about that side of things, about how important that is to be able to play it cool, or if you get to know your opponent, he's a hothead. Like, how much does that factor in?
Yeah, it's a huge factor. Really, poker is a zero-sum game, which means if you and I are playing and you win $50, that means I lost $50, right? It
Oh,
has
right.
to always, somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. And the point is to win. That's why we play. And so you want to do whatever you can to increase your edge, as we would call it. So learning how to read people, picking up on their facial tics or their habits, their betting patterns, but while doing the opposite, you got to disguise your own. If you've got a good hand and you start tapping your foot, somebody is going to pick up on that sort of thing, because there's a reason that you must be tapping your foot. You're excited about your hand. Makes it easier to fold. So it's very important to have a good poker face. And I've been around, like, I feel like I've got a good poker face, but I also have watched the best in the world from a front row seat, getting to report on it. And it's unbelievable. Like, they're stone cold killers when it comes to that. And yeah, it's definitely a big part of it. Bluffing is a big part of the game. You don't necessarily need the best hand to win in poker. If you can just convince your opponent that they're beat, even if they're not, and they fold, then you win that money. And so there's a lot of people who, that's what they love best about the game. There's other people who aren't comfortable bluffing, so they just wait for good cards and try to win that way. But the best players in the world find a way to do both, in my experience.
It's funny because I remember, I don't know the exact names, but I'm just kind of scrolling through. I see Chris Moneymaker here. I see Annette Obrastad. Some of the people, Chip Reese, they're on here wearing sunglasses and that sort of thing. So you're allowed to have sunglasses on when you're playing poker?
Yeah, you can wear sunglasses, you can wear hats, you just can't wear like full masks. Outside of COVID, we were required to wear masks for a while
Yeah.
there, but you can wear whatever you want to kind of sell your poker face. Some people just don't have the confidence that their eyes won't give away information, right? That they're staring too hard, they're staring too long, they're looking back and forth. Wearing sunglasses, a lot of people feel more comfortable doing that, and so it's pretty common. I've worn sunglasses at the table. I don't usually much anymore, and you don't really see the biggest pros in the world wearing sunglasses anymore, but a lot of recreational players or kind of a lot of mid-stakes players still do.
So when you're talking about bluffing, and obviously this is to try and fool your opponent into thinking you have a better hand than you do. What is, like, when you play, like, how do you bluff? Is it by just putting more money out, or what are some of the examples of what you could do to really try and, let's say you're playing against me, how do you try and psych me out with a bluff?
Right. So I'd take the information to find the right opportunity to bluff. So let's say, for instance, there are three hearts on board. So a flush. A flush is five of the same suit, right? You have clubs, spades, diamonds, and hearts. So let's say that there are three hearts out there, and I have just the ace of hearts with the queen of clubs in my hand, right? I have the draw to what we call the nuts, the best possible hand. If another heart comes, I'd have a 5-card flush with the ace of hearts. And let's say I'm betting this and you're coming along and you're calling, but the way you're calling, you're kind of hesitant. You don't seem very excited. You seem weak. That's how I'm perceiving. That's the information I'm picking up on. Well, let's say the next two cards come and I miss. I don't end up with anything. I miss my flush draw. I have ace high technically, but you don't know that. And having the ace of hearts gives me a great opportunity to bluff, right? Because if I put the pressure on you, you seem weak. I put in a lot of money representing that I have the ace and maybe another heart, because I really do have the ace. Makes it easier for me to settle that story, if you will, because I know you don't have the ace.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to give me credit for it. And so that might be a spot where, because I have this card that gives me a good opportunity to bluff, because I perceive you being weak, you were hesitant, it doesn't seem like you're super happy with your hand, I might just move all in and put you to the test. Like, do you really want to call off your entire stack with your hand if you're weak? It's a tough spot. And that's where, poker players, when we say put you to the test, is you can be in a pressure cooker. Well, what do you do? Are you willing to call off $1,000 with one pair when your opponent has been showing strength, or is he just bluffing? And that's what's so great about the game. Every hand is a new puzzle, is a new situation that you're put in, and I think that's why a lot of people like it, especially because poker can be played by anybody of any age, race, nationality, anything, and a lot of people, especially as they get older, they look for outlets where they can continue to compete. They can scratch that competitive itch. And I think poker is one of the best ways for them to do that. And I think that's the reason why the game has, they say it's like as American as apple pie, if you will. Like, it's been around for so long.
So you can still win a hand if you only have a pair.
I mean, you can win a hand with ace high if your opponent only has king high.
And that can happen sometimes, right?
You're right. Exactly. And that's a number one skill too. If somebody's just starting out in poker, one of the first skills you're going to want to learn is, based upon the cards that are out there, the information that what's the best possible hand somebody could have, right? So for instance, if a board is, and by board I mean the 5 community cards, and No Limit Texas Hold'em, there'll be 5 cards that all players share. So between the 5 cards that are up and the 2 in your hand, you have 7 cards, and the goal is to make the best 5-card hand between any combination of those 7 cards. So if on the board there's a pair, so let's say there's a pair of 5s on the board, a paired board means that all of a sudden some hands are possible that wouldn't be possible on an unpaired board, right? So if you're going to have 4 of a kind, 2 5s on the board, 2 5s in your hand. All right, 4 of a kind is possible. It also means a full house is possible because a full house being 3 of one card and 2 of another. So 3 kings and 2 5s is kings full of 5s. So just recognizing what's possible so you can play your hand accordingly, right? Because if the board reads 5 5 king king deuce and it has 3 hearts on there, and let's say I have a flush. A flush is a decent hand, but when a 5 5 king king are out there, all it takes is my opponent to have a 5 or a king. They'd have a full house and they would easily beat me. So that would be a spot where you take the information, you take the possibilities, and you act accordingly. You probably play a little more conservatively because the risk of them having a better hand in that circumstance is pretty high. Whereas the flip is true. When you have the best hand, you want to try to build a pot. You want to try, when you have the best hand, if you have the best possible hand, you want to try to build a pot. And doing that is an art in itself, right? Because let's say you and I are playing for $1, $2 blinds, and we each have $500. I have the best hand. I want to try to get all your $500. Well, if there's only $10 in the pot and I move all in for $500, that's going to make it pretty easy for you to fold.